The files were supposed to be destroyed in 1952. All of them, every photograph, every measurement, every testimony, burned in the basement furnaces of Building 7, Moscow State Archive. But someone didn't comply. Valentina Mikhailovna worked there for 43 years, started in 1949, 3 years before the orders came down. She was 19 then, assigned to the restricted basement levels where documents went to die. She saved 6 folders, hid them behind a false panel in the furnace room. For 71 years they've been there, behind brick and mortar and official forgetting. Last month, her granddaughter called me. Valentina died in January. Left instructions. The folders were to be retrieved and given to someone who would understand what they meant. I'm holding them now. The paper is brittle, edges brown with age. 6 folders, each one stamped with a classification level that technically no longer exists. Also Bay OS, secret classification level that technically no longer exists. Also Bay OS, E, Immediate LOS. The first page is a memo, dated April 1952, signed by someone whose name has been blacked out so thoroughly the paper is thin, where the ink soaked through. Subject line, final resolution of the Tartarian incompatibility. Incompatibility, that's the word they used. Not threat, not enemy. Incompatibility. Like 2 operating systems that can't run on the same machine. Like matter and antimatter, one or the other, not both. The basement where these files were hidden is still there, 4 levels below street level, where Moscow's oldest foundations meet bedrock. The furnace room where Valentina worked, where she was supposed to burn evidence of something that made the choice binary, them or us. The Moscow State Archive sits on Bolshaya Pirogovska Street, a 7-story building that looks like every other Stalinist structure from the outside. Concrete, severe, windows like narrow eyes, but below street level. It goes deeper than the official plans show. 4 basement levels, then a 5th that doesn't appear on any blueprint filed after 1953. The elevator only goes to B4. To reach B5, you take stairs behind a door, marked electrical authorized personnel only. The stairs are narrow, concrete, walls painted institutional green that's flaking now, showing older paint beneath. The temperature drops as you descend. By the bottom, it's 12 degrees Celsius year-round. The furnace room is at the end of a hallway that runs the length of the building. The furnaces themselves are silent now, cold for decades. But they're still there. 3 of them, cast iron. Large enough to burn entire file cabinets if you broke them down first. Valentina Mikhailovna spent 43 years coming down to this room. First to burn files. Later, after they installed newer systems upstairs, to maintain the environmental controls that kept the basement stable. She's been dead 4 months, but her voice is on a recording her granddaughter made in December, 2 weeks before Valentina's stroke. I was 19, the recording says. The voice is thin, careful with each word. They brought the boxes down on carts, wooden crates. I counted 47 of them that first week. She pauses on the tape. Sound of breathing, slightly labored. The man who supervised, I never knew his name. We called him the overseer. He opened the first crate in front of me. Showed me what was inside. Photographers mostly. Documents, some things I didn't understand. Metal objects, crystalline structures. Another pause. Longer. You will burn everything, he said. Everything except what I designate for transfer to Special Archive 19. I asked what Special Archive 19 was. He looked at me like I'd asked what death was. It doesn't exist, he said. He said, that's the point. The tape has a timestamp. This part is 23 minutes in. I started burning, 1 document at a time. Photographs curled and blackened. The smell was terrible. Not just paper, something else. Chemical, the metal objects melted, but they melted wrong. left residues that wouldn't burn away completely. Her voice drops lower. After 2 weeks, I started reading things before I burned them. The overseer would leave me alone for hours. I think he couldn't stand to watch. The documents were testimonies, measurements, descriptions of places and people, archaeological reports that had been classified immediately upon discovery. Silence for almost 30 seconds. Then, one folder had photographs of a dig site in Kazakhstan, 1947. They'd uncovered a city, intact, not ruins. Buildings with power still running. Lights that worked. Climate control systems operating without any apparent power source. The archaeologists who discovered it were recalled to Moscow within 48 hours. Their notes were marked for immediate destruction. The tape continues. Valentina's voice is steady, but something underneath trembles. I realized after a month of burning, they were erasing something that couldn't coexist with what we were building. Every document made that clearer. The Tartarian civilization, that's what the internal memos called it, operated on principles that contradicted the society we were constructing. Their technology, their organization, their entire worldview. She takes a breath. "Why are we destroying this?" I asked the overseer once, only once. He looked at me with something like pity. "Because," he said, "you cannot have two incompatible systems sharing the same world. One system must be erased for the other to survive. We chose our system." Valentina stopped burning documents in June 1952. By then, 46 of the 47 crates were ash. The 47th crate arrived on June 14th. The overseer never came down that day. She opened it alone. Inside were 6 folders marked with a classification above top secret. Strategic Incompatibility Assessment, Final Recommendation. She hid them, replaced them with blank folders she'd prepared, burned the blanks, filed a completion report. For 71 years, they stayed behind that false panel. I knew what I was doing. Her voice says on the recording, I was preserving evidence of the choice that was made. To erase them so we could exist. The basement is quiet in a way that goes beyond absence of sound. The walls are thick. The ceiling is reinforced concrete from an era when they built things to last through bombardment. The silence has weight. Pyotr Anatolievich worked here too. Different era. He started in 1983, long after Valentina's time burning files. He was an archive specialist, assigned to the restricted sections. He's 63 now, retired early in 2007 for medical reasons. We're in the furnace room because he asked to meet here. You need to understand the space, he said on the phone, where it happened. He's standing near the largest furnace, hands in the pockets of a heavy coat, despite the building's heating. My job was to maintain the closed collections, documents that existed but couldn't be accessed. We had entire sections like that, catalogued, preserved, sealed. I spent 24 years managing files that no one was allowed to read. His breath is visible in the cold air. In 1989, during the reforms, there was a brief moment when we thought things would open up. There was talk of declassification. I was assigned to prepare inventories of the restricted collections, identify what could be released. He moves to one of the file cabinets along the wall. The metal is old, olive drab, edges worn. This section held what we called the incompatibility files. That was the internal designation, not official, just what we called them. Documents related to civilizations or systems that had been systematically removed from historical record. His hand rests on the cabinet handle but doesn't open it. I spent 3 months cataloging. The pattern became clear by week 2. Every file documented something that couldn't coexist with modern industrial civilization. Power systems that didn't require fuel. Social organizations that prevented centralized control. Technologies that eliminated scarcity. Philosophical frameworks that made modern governance impossible. He's quiet for a moment. The Tartarian files were the largest subset. Hundreds of folders. Archaeological evidence. Anthropological studies, engineering analyses, all of it suppressed, all of it demonstrating the same thing. Their civilization was fundamentally incompatible with ours. He finally opens the cabinet, empty, completely empty. In November 1989, I came down to continue work. Every file was gone. Someone had removed them overnight. No transfer documentation, no orders I was shown. They just ceased to exist. His voice drops. My supervisor pulled me aside the next day. The incompatibility assessment stands, he said. Some things cannot be allowed to inspire alternatives. I asked what that meant. He said, it means the choice was made correctly in 1952, and it still stands today. We cannot risk anyone understanding what was lost. Piotr's medical retirement came 3 months later. Stress-related complications, the official record says. He won't specify what actually happened, just that he understood the message. They didn't want me understanding that Tartaria wasn't erased because they were dangerous, he says quietly. They were erased because they offered proof that another way was possible, that everything we built, the centralization, the control, the scarcity-based economics, wasn't inevitable. It was a choice. His hands are shaking slightly, and once you know another way existed and thrived, you start questioning whether the choice was right. That's what they couldn't allow. Not then. Not now. I'm sitting in the furnace room with these 6 folders spread across a metal table. Valentina's folders, the ones that survived. The first folder contains photographs. Black and white. Some color has faded to sepia. Images of structures that don't match any architectural style in conventional history. Buildings with seamless surfaces, no mortar, no joints, as if they were grown rather than built. The second folder has measurements, engineering analyses dated 1947, 1949, thermal scans, material composition studies. Every analysis reaches the same conclusion, written in slightly different ways. Technology operates without apparent power source. Energy distribution system incompatible with known physics. Recommend immediate classification and site neutralization. Site neutralization, that's what they called it. The third folder changes everything. It's an internal memo from 1951, subject, Strategic Assessment of Civilization Level Incompatibility. The language is careful, bureaucratic, but the meaning is clear. The Tartarian technological infrastructure, if widely known, would fundamentally undermine the industrial economic model upon which modern civilization depends. Their power systems eliminate fuel dependency. Their construction techniques eliminate material scarcity. Their social organization prevents hierarchical control structures. These are not merely alternative approaches. They are existentially incompatible with current systems. I read it 3 times. My hands start shaking. This isn't about hiding advanced technology. This is about hiding the fact that modern civilization made a choice. That scarcity, hierarchy, control. These weren't inevitable. They were selected. And Tartaria proved the alternative could work. In Akademgorodok, outside Novosibirsk, there's a research facility that officially studies permafrost dynamics. Building 12 has a basement that extends 40 meters underground, much deeper than necessary for permafrost research. Dr. Ekaterina Volkov worked there from 1976 to 1983. She was a materials scientist brought in to analyze samples from archaeological sites. She's 74 now, living in a small apartment in Novosibirsk. We speak on a video call because she won't travel to Moscow. The people who remember what I worked on, she says, some of them still have reach. We received samples in sealed containers, no context, no site information, just material for analysis. My job was to determine composition, age, manufacturing process. Her apartment is dim behind her on the screen. The samples were impossible. That's not hyperbole. They were made of materials that couldn't exist given our understanding of manufacturing, crystalline structures grown at the molecular level. metallic compounds that were somehow both rigid and flexible. Everything indicated advanced nanotechnology, but this was the 1970s. We didn't even have the conceptual framework for what we were seeing. She pauses to sip something from a cup. After 2 years of analysis, I was called into a meeting. 3 men I'd never seen before. They asked me to sign a document. It stated that my research had shown the samples to be misidentified geological formations, natural crystals, nothing more. Her hands tighten around the cup. I refuse to sign. The samples were clearly manufactured, clearly technological. I showed them my analysis. One of the men looked at me and said, "Dr. Volkov, you misunderstand your position. This is not about what the samples are. This is about what we can allow them to be." She was reassigned 2 weeks later to a different facility, different work. The samples disappeared. Her analysis was never published. Years later, after the Soviet Union fell, I tried to find the records, tried to publish my findings. I was contacted by someone, I still don't know who explained it to me plainly. The samples demonstrated technology that would destabilize current economic and power structures if known. Their existence cannot be acknowledged because acknowledging them opens questions about why such technology isn't in use. Those questions lead to answers that cannot be allowed. She sets down the cup. Tartaria wasn't just erased from history. It had to be erased because it was proof that scarcity is manufactured, that centralized power isn't necessary, that the systems we live under are choices, not inevitabilities. Back in the archive basement, I'm staring at folder 4. It contains minutes from a 1952 meeting. Attendees' names are blacked out, but their positions are listed. Minister of Internal Affairs, Director of State Security, Chief of Strategic Assessment Division. The minutes are brief, clinical. They read like a board meeting deciding whether to discontinue a product line. Assessment concludes that Tartarian technological and social frameworks pose existential threat to current civilization structure. Recommendation: complete historical erasure. Justification: incompatible systems cannot coexist without destabilizing both. Strategic choice made in favor of current system. There's a handwritten note in the margin, barely legible. It's them or us. We choose us. The pattern is complete now. This wasn't about hiding aliens or secret weapons. This was about hiding evidence that the world we live in, built on scarcity, on hierarchical control, on fossil fuel dependency, wasn't the only option, wasn't even the best option. Just the option that those in power chose. Tartaria had to be erased because allowing people to know it existed would make them ask, why don't we live like that? Why did we choose this instead? Those questions don't have good answers. The furnace room has a small office attached. 2 rooms, really. One where the furnace operator would have maintained logs, another that seems to have been used for private meetings. There's a table in the second room. On that table, someone has left marks, scratched into the wood surface, numbers, dates, coordinates. Professor Dmitry Sokolov knows about those marks. He used to teach Soviet history at Moscow State University. Used to, past tense. He's 68, grey beard, thick glasses, hands that won't stop moving when he talks. I came down here in 2003, he says, standing in the doorway to that second room. I was researching suppressed archaeological sites for a book. Someone I never learned who sent me an anonymous package with this address and instructions to look for the furnace room. He steps inside, moves to the table, traces one of the scratched coordinates with his finger. These are locations, archaeological sites that were discovered and then immediately classified. I spent a year trying to verify them, traveling to some, requesting declassification of records for others. His finger stops on one set of numbers, 51.1694 degrees N, 71.4491 degrees E, near Astana, Kazakhstan. This site was discovered in 1949, a construction crew building a dam. They found structures underground, intact buildings, Advanced infrastructure. The site was classified within hours. The crew was reassigned to Siberia. Their families were relocated. The dam project was moved 40 kilometers west. He looks up from the table. I found 7 different sites like this, all discovered between 1945 and 1953, all immediately classified, all showing evidence of advanced civilization. And in every case, the classification documents used the same phrase, incompatible with state development goals. His hands finally still, pressed against the table. I published preliminary findings in 2004. An academic journal, small circulation. The article argued that the Soviet state had systematically suppressed archaeological evidence that contradicted their development model, that they'd hidden proof of alternative civilizational approaches. He moves away from the table to the window that looks out on the basement corridor. My university position was terminated in 2005. Restructuring, they called it. My research funding was pulled. Publishers who had expressed interest in my book stopped returning calls. I was effectively erased from academic life. His reflection in the window is tired. But before that happened, I received a visitor, an old man, 80s maybe. He came to my office at the university, sat down without asking, and he told me this. Dimitri's voice changes, becomes quieter. The sites you're investigating represent civilizational divergence. Tartaria developed along different principles than modern industrial society. Their technology assumed cooperation, not competition. Their infrastructure assumed abundance, not scarcity. Their social organization assumed distributed authority, not centralized control. He turns from the window. The old man continued. When modern civilization encountered Tartarian remains, a choice was made. Not a choice between good and evil. A choice between incompatible operational principles, like trying to run 2 operating systems on the same computer. One had to be deleted. We chose to delete Tartaria. Dimitri's hands start moving again, agitated. I asked him why. Why not adapt? Why not learn? Why not integrate? His voice cracks slightly. He said, because their system threatened every power structure of modern civilization. Energy companies can't exist if power is abundant and decentralized. Financial systems can't function if scarcity is eliminated. Governments can't maintain control if authority is truly distributed. Tartaria didn't just offer an alternative. Tartaria's existence proved that all our scarcity, all our hierarchies, all our centralized control, it's all artificial, all chosen. That knowledge is more dangerous than any weapon. The old man Lefit Dimitri never saw him again, never learned his name. But I understood then. Tartaria wasn't erased for being wrong. They were erased for being right, for proving that another way works, for threatening just by existing, to expose every foundation of modern power as a choice, rather than a necessity. Section 6. Suppression evidence. Folder 5 contains what Valentina called the proof of continuation. It's not historical documents. It's recent. Very recent. A series of internal memos from 2011 to 2019. Different organizations. UNESCO, Russian state archives, various academic institutions, all discussing the same thing. Suppression protocols for Tartarian-related discoveries. A 2015 memo from a UNESCO cultural assessment team describes a site in Uzbekistan, buildings discovered during highway construction. Architectural analysis suggests non-conventional power distribution systems. Recommend site classification under Alternative History Protocol 7. I search for what Protocol 7 is. Find reference in a 2013 document. Sites demonstrating technological approaches incompatible with established historical narratives are to be either recontextualized within acceptable frameworks, or, if recontextualization is not feasible, access is to be restricted pending further assessment. Translation, hide it or explain it away. A 2017 email chain discusses a research paper submitted to an engineering journal. The paper analyzes building materials from a site in Kazakhstan, concluding they demonstrate room temperature superconductivity in structural elements dated to approximately 1750. The email chain shows the paper being passed up through editorial review to the journal's board, then to what seems to be an outside consultation. The final email is brief. Paper cannot be published as submitted. Findings are incompatible with established materials science timeline. Recommend rejection on methodological grounds. The researcher's response is included. My methodology is sound. These results are reproducible. You're rejecting this because it contradicts historical narrative, not because it's wrong. There's no reply to that email. Folder 6 is the one Valentina's voice on the recording specifically mentioned. The last folder, she'd said. The one that made me understand the choice was still being made, still being enforced. It's a risk assessment from 2008. The header identifies it as from an organization called the Strategic Historical Integrity Group. I can't find any record of this organization existing. The document assesses the threat level of growing public interest in Tartaria and similar suppressed civilizational narratives. Internet-facilitated information sharing has created new vectors for alternative historical narratives to gain traction. The Tartarian hypothesis specifically poses strategic risk due to its implications regarding. The document lists them: energy systems independent of fossil fuels, construction techniques that eliminate material scarcity, social organization models that prevent centralized control, economic frameworks that function without induced scarcity, public acceptance of Tartarian civilization as historical fact would undermine confidence in current energy paradigms, question necessity of resource-based economic systems, destabilize hierarchical governance models, create demand for alternative technological development, recommendation, continue active historical narrative management, ensure Tartarian hypothesis remains categorized as conspiracy theory, maintain academic gatekeeping, monitor and counteract information distribution. The document is 47 pages long. It's a manual for suppressing historical truth. The final page has a handwritten note. The choice of 1952 remains valid. Incompatible systems cannot coexist. Our civilization or theirs. We continue to choose ours. The basement is colder than it was an hour ago. Or maybe I'm just feeling the weight of these folders differently now. There's one more recording. Valentina made it separately. 2 days before the long recording her granddaughter captured. This one is shorter. Just 4 minutes. Her granddaughter found it on a separate device marked "Final Testimony to be shared." The voice is weaker than in the other recording. More labored. I've kept this secret for 71 years. I'm 90 years old. I won't live much longer. The cancer is in my bones now. The doctors say weeks, maybe a month. Breathing, slow and careful. I need someone to understand what I witnessed. Not just the burning of files. The choice that was made is still being made. A pause. Sound of something being moved. Paper, maybe. Tartaria offered proof that scarcity is artificial. That the struggle for resources, for energy, for survival, it doesn't have to be this way. Their buildings powered themselves. Their society organized without force. They created abundance without exploitation. Her voice is steady despite the weakness. But that proof threatened everything modern civilization is built on. Every power structure, every economic system, every justification for control. If people knew that abundance was possible, was proven possible, was hidden from them, the longest pause yet, almost 15 seconds. The men who ordered the burning, they weren't evil, not in the simple way. They believed they were protecting civilization. They believed that our system, despite its flaws, was survivable. And Tartarian knowledge, widely known, would destabilize everything, would make people demand change that the powerful couldn't control. A sound like papers being gathered. So they chose, erase Tartaria, Protect our civilization, them or us. They chose us. Another pause. But I want you to understand, every day we live with manufactured scarcity, with controlled resources, with justified hierarchy. These are the consequences of that choice. We could have learned from them. We could have adapted. We chose erasure instead. The recording has 30 seconds left, just breathing. Then, I saved these files because someone needed to know the choice was made, is still being made. That every time we're told, there is no alternative, it's a lie built on the ashes of evidence that alternatives existed and thrived. The recording ends. The furnace room still smells faintly of ash. After 70 years, like the building remembers what burned here, I'm standing where Valentina stood in 1952, where she fed documents into flames, where she watched evidence of another way of living turn to smoke. The 6 folders are in a bag at my feet. Valentina's granddaughter asked what I would do with them. I told her the truth. I don't know. Publishing them changes nothing materially. The power structures they threaten are too entrenched. The systems they contradict are too fundamental to how modern civilization operates. These folders won't bring down governments or transform economies. But they prove the choice was made. That's what Valentina wanted known. Not that Tartaria was perfect. Not that returning to their ways is possible or even desirable. Just that we chose, consciously chose, to erase proof that alternatives existed. Own chose scarcity over abundance, chose hierarchy over distribution, chose control over cooperation, and we keep choosing. Every time alternative technologies are suppressed, every time social experiments in cooperation are undermined, every time someone asks, what if there's another way? And the answer is, there isn't. The question remains, why? Why did Tartaria have to be erased? Why couldn't both systems coexist? Why was the choice framed as them or us? The folders offer answers, but the answers lead to harder questions. Who benefited from the erasure? What are we still hiding? What other alternatives have been deleted? What would change if people knew? The basement is quiet. The furnaces are cold. The files that burned here are gone forever, except for 6 folders, behind a false panel, saved by a 19-year-old woman who understood that someone, someday, would need to know the choice was made. Tartaria didn't have to be erased because they were dangerous. They had to be erased because they were proof that everything we're told is inevitable. The scarcity, the hierarchy, the control, it's all chosen. And if it's chosen, it can be unchosen. That's the real incompatibility, not between technologies or systems, between power that depends on inevitability and knowledge that proves choice. They chose to erase them so we would never know we could choose differently. The question that remains, now that you know the choice was made, what do you choose?